Marcus got another mean letter from his neighbor Karen. She was very angry at him and his baby. He looked out his window. Karen had a gun. His little daughter was playing and smiling. She was happy. She did not know something bad was going to happen soon. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The first warning letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under Marcus Reed's door like a snake in the grass. He found it while getting ready for work, his 6-month-old daughter Lila babbling happily in her high chair. The letter was typed on official Willow Creek Homeowners Association letterhead, signed by Karen Mitchell, President. Violation notice. Your truck is parked 6 inches over the designated parking area. Second offense. Fine, $150. Marcus crumpled the letter, his jaw tightening. This was getting ridiculous. Ever since he'd moved to Willow Creek a month ago, Karen had been watching him like a hawk. She'd already fined him for leaving his garbage can out 15 minutes too long and for having a small oil stain on his driveway. What do you think, baby girl? He asked Lila, who gurgled and threw her cereal on the floor. Should Daddy tell the mean lady to mind her own business? But Marcus wasn't that kind of man. He'd grown up poor, learned to work hard and keep his head down. As a single father, he couldn't afford to make enemies. So he moved his truck, paid the fine, and hoped Karen would leave him alone. She didn't. The second letter came 3 days later. Then a third. Each one more petty than the last. His lawn was a 1/4 inch too long. His mailbox was the wrong shade of black. His baby's crying was disturbing the peace during quiet hours. Marcus's co-workers at the garage started to notice his stress. Man, you look like you haven't slept in weeks, said Tony, his supervisor. That baby keeping you up? It's not Lila, Marcus said, wiping grease from his hands. It's this crazy woman in my neighborhood. She's got it out for me. Tony frowned. What kind of crazy? The dangerous kind. Marcus showed him the latest letter. She's fined me 12 times in 4 weeks. I'm broke, Tony. I can't keep paying these. Maybe it's time to fight back, Tony suggested. File a complaint with the city or something. But Marcus shook his head. I just want to raise my daughter in peace. Fighting won't give me that. If only he'd known that Karen Mitchell had no intention of giving him peace. Karen stood at her living room window watching Marcus play with his baby in the park. Her fingers drummed against the glass, her mind racing with plans. The fines weren't working. The man was still there, still contaminating her perfect neighborhood with his presence. She'd worked 20 years to build Willow Creek into the ideal community. Every house painted in approved colors. Every lawn cut to regulation height. Every resident following the rules she'd carefully crafted. Then Marcus Reed had moved in with his rusted truck and his crying baby, and everything started falling apart. He doesn't belong here, she muttered to herself, pulling out her phone. She'd already called the police twice this week about suspicious activity, but they'd stopped taking her seriously. The security company was expensive, and the guards were getting tired of her complaints. Karen opened her desk drawer and stared at the handgun her late husband had bought her. Robert had insisted she learn to shoot after a break-in 3 streets over. You never know what kind of people might move into the neighborhood, he'd said. How right he'd been. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister. Saw the news about property values dropping in your area. Maybe it's time to sell and move to a retirement community? Karen's blood boiled. Property values dropping because of people like Marcus. She'd built her whole life around this house, this neighborhood. She wasn't about to let some mechanic with a baby destroy everything she'd worked for. She picked up the gun, feeling its weight. Maybe it was time to send a clearer message. The next evening, Marcus sat on his front porch, feeding Lila her bottle. The sunset painted the sky in soft colors, and for a moment he felt peaceful. Then he saw Karen marching across the street, her face twisted with rage. You got my letter? She demanded, stopping at the bottom of his steps. Marcus sighed. Which one? You've sent me 15 this month. The one about the noise violations. That baby of yours has been crying every night. She's a baby, Mrs. Mitchell. Babies cry. It's what they do. Karen's eyes flashed. Not in my neighborhood. I've had 3 complaints from neighbors about the noise. What neighbors? Marcus stood up, still holding Lila. I've talked to everyone on this street. They all said they don't mind. Mrs. Chin even brought me homemade soup when Lila was sick. They're lying to protect you, Karen snapped. They're too polite to say what they really think. Or maybe you're the only one with a problem, Marcus said quietly. Maybe you should ask yourself why you're so angry all the time. Karen's face went red. How dare you? I am a respected member of this community. I've been president of the HOA for 8 years. I've kept property values stable, maintained order. You've terrorized people into submission, Marcus interrupted. That's not the same thing. I protect this neighborhood from people like you. People like me? Marcus's voice hardened. What exactly does that mean? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She'd been thinking it for weeks, but she'd never said it out loud. People who don't belong. People who bring down the neighborhood. People who... Who what? Marcus stepped closer, his protective instincts flaring. Say it. Say what you really mean. But Karen couldn't. Even in her rage, she knew those words would destroy her. Instead, she turned and stormed back to her house, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement. Marcus watched her go, his heart pounding. He looked down at Lila, who was staring up at him with wide, innocent eyes. We might need to find a new home, baby girl, he whispered. This place isn't safe for us anymore. That night, Karen sat in her kitchen, staring at the gun on the table. Her laptop was open, showing the neighborhood Facebook page. She'd been posting about Marcus for weeks, but instead of support, she'd gotten criticism. Give the guy a break, Karen. He's just trying to raise his kid. Maybe if you spent less time harassing neighbors and more time making friends, you'd be happier. I've lived here for 15 years and I've never seen you this worked up about anyone. What's really going on? Karen slammed the laptop shut. They didn't understand. They couldn't see what she saw. Marcus was just the beginning. If she let him stay, others would follow. The neighborhood would change and everything she'd built would crumble. She picked up the gun, remembering the lessons Robert had paid for. Center mass, the instructor had said. Don't hesitate. Don't think. Just shoot. Maybe it was time to stop thinking. The next evening, Marcus took Lila to the park as usual. It was their routine. Work, dinner, then a walk to the playground where Lila could watch the other kids play. She was too young to join them, but she loved the sounds and colors. Marcus sat on a bench, bouncing Lila gently while she reached for soap bubbles another father was blowing. The evening was perfect, peaceful. He decided to start looking for a new apartment that weekend. Maybe somewhere with a yard where Lila could play without HOA restrictions. Excuse me. Marcus looked up to see a security guard approaching. Yes. I need you to move along. You're loitering. Marcus frowned. I'm in a public park. I'm not loitering. Ma'am over there says you are. The guard pointed toward Karen's house. She stood on her porch watching them. I'm sitting on a bench in a public park with my baby, Marcus said calmly. I have every right to be here. The guard looked uncomfortable. Look, just move along, okay? I don't want any trouble. Marcus stood up, not wanting to upset Lila. Fine. We'll go home. But as they walked toward the street, Karen stepped into their path. This time she had the gun in her hand. You just can't take a hint, can you? She said, her voice shaking with rage. Marcus froze, his arms tightening around Lila. Mrs. Mitchell, please. There's no need for this. There's every need. Karen's voice cracked. I gave you chance after chance. I tried to be reasonable. But you just kept pushing and pushing. I paid your fines. I followed your rules. I moved my truck, cut my grass, fixed my mailbox. What more do you want from me? I want you gone. Karen screamed. I want you out of my neighborhood. Then I'll go, Marcus said quietly. Tomorrow. I'll start looking for a new place tomorrow. Just please put the gun down. Don't do this in front of my baby. But Karen was beyond reason. 20 years of controlling every detail of her neighborhood, and this one man had made her feel powerless. She couldn't let him win. You should have left when I first asked, she whispered. The shot echoed through the quiet neighborhood like thunder. Marcus fell to his knees, his chest on fire. Blood spread across his shirt, warm and sticky. But his arms never loosened around Lila. Even as his vision blurred, even as his strength faded, he held her close. Daddy's got you, he whispered. Daddy's got you, baby girl. Lila was crying now, her little fists beating against his chest. She didn't understand why Daddy was on the ground, why there was red on his shirt, why he was breathing so hard. Neighbors ran from their houses, drawn by the gunshot. Mrs. Chin screamed and dropped her grocery bag. Mr. Johnson called 911 while his wife wrapped her arms around her own children. Karen stood frozen, the gun hanging from her hand. Her perfect neighborhood was in chaos. People were shouting, crying, running toward the man she'd shot. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. I didn't mean to, she whispered, but nobody heard her. The paramedics arrived too late. Marcus was gone before they reached the hospital, his final breath spent whispering to Lila that everything would be okay. The news spread like wildfire. HOA president shoots single father in front of baby. The story had everything the media loved. A senseless tragedy, a villain everyone could hate, and an innocent child left orphaned. Within hours, news trucks lined the streets of Willow Creek. Reporters interviewed neighbors, who spoke of Marcus's kindness and Karen's increasingly erratic behavior. The shooting was caught on a security camera, and the footage played on every channel. Social media exploded. #Justice for Marcus trended worldwide. People shared photos of Marcus with Lila, stories of his kindness and calls for justice. Someone started a GoFundMe for Lila's future, and within days, it had raised over $500,000. Karen was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. As the police led her away in handcuffs, neighbors lined the street. Some shouted angrily, others wept. All of them watched the woman who had terrorized their neighborhood for years finally face consequences. But for Lila, the real tragedy was just beginning. Amara Reed got the call at 3 a.m. Her brother was dead, shot by a neighbor. His baby daughter was in protective custody, waiting for family to claim her. Amara drove through the night, her mind numb with grief. Marcus had been her best friend, her protector when they were kids. When their parents died in a car accident, he'd worked 2 jobs to put her through college. When she'd gotten divorced, he'd let her cry on his shoulder for months. Now he was gone and she was all Lila had left. The social worker was kind but efficient. "She's been through trauma," she explained. "She might be fussy, have trouble sleeping. We recommend counseling as she gets older." Amara took Lila home to her small apartment, setting up a crib in the corner of her bedroom. The baby was quiet, too quiet, as if she sensed that something fundamental had changed in her world. "I don't know how to do this," Amara whispered to her reflection in the mirror. "I don't know how to be a mom." But she would learn. For Marcus. For Lila. For the love that connected them all. Karen's trial began 6 months later. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, reporters, and strangers who had followed the case. Karen sat at the defense table, looking small and pale in her orange jumpsuit. Her lawyer argued that she'd acted in fear, that she genuinely believed Marcus was a threat. They painted her as a woman under pressure, someone who'd snapped under the weight of responsibility. But the prosecutor had the security footage, the threatening letters, the testimony of neighbors who'd watched Karen's obsession grow. They showed the jury a woman consumed by hatred, someone who'd chosen murder over coexistence. Amara testified about her brother's character, about his love for Lila, about the fears he'd shared in their last phone conversation. She held back tears as she described cleaning out his apartment, finding a Father's Day card he'd bought for himself, signed "From your biggest fan, Lila." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Karen was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. As the verdict was read, Karen finally broke down. She sobbed into her hands, her carefully maintained composure cracking at last. But in the gallery, Amara felt no satisfaction. Her brother was still dead. Lila was still orphaned. Justice felt hollow. Lila grew up knowing she was loved, but also knowing she was different. Other kids had daddies who picked them up from school, who taught them to ride bikes, who scared away monsters from under the bed. Lila had Aunt Amara, who tried her best but couldn't fill the hole Marcus had left behind. On Lila's 5th birthday, Amara took her to the memorial bench the neighborhood had installed in the park. It was made of dark wood, with a brass plaque that read, "Marcus Reed, beloved father, friend, and neighbor. His love lives on." "Tell me about Daddy," Lila asked, tracing the letters with her small finger. Amara sat beside her, pulling out a photo album. "Your daddy was the kindest man I ever knew. He worked hard at the garage fixing cars and trucks. But his real job was taking care of you. Why did the mean lady hurt him?" Amara had dreaded this question, but she'd prepared for it. Some people have so much anger in their hearts that they can't see the good in others. Your daddy tried to show her kindness, but she was too angry to accept it. "Is she still in jail?" "Yes, and she'll stay there for a long time. She's learning that actions have consequences." Lila nodded solemnly. "I want to write her a letter." "Why, sweetheart?" "To tell her I forgive her. Daddy would want me to." Amara's eyes filled with tears. At 5 years old, Lila was already more mature than many adults. Marcus would have been so proud. Lila's letter to Karen was written in crayon on construction paper, with stick figures and hearts decorating the margins. "Dear Mrs. Mitchell, my name is Lila. You killed my daddy, but I still love you. Aunt Amara says you were very angry and made a bad choice. I hope you are learning to be nicer in jail. I think about my daddy every day. He used to sing to me and make funny faces. He would have taught me to ride a bike and help me with homework. I'm sad I won't get to do those things with him. But I'm not angry at you. Daddy always said angry people need love the most. So I love you and I hope you get better. Love, Lila. P.S. I hope you like the picture I drew of you smiling. That's how I want to remember you. The letter found its way to Karen's prison cell, where she read it over and over until the paper was soft from her tears. No one had shown her kindness in 2 years. The guards saw her as a monster, other inmates avoided her, and her own family had stopped visiting. But this little girl, this child she'd orphaned, had sent her love. Karen began to write back. Over the years, Lila and Karen exchanged dozens of letters. Karen wrote about her childhood, about the fears that had driven her to control everything around her. She'd grown up in chaos with alcoholic parents and a house that was always dirty, always loud. The pristine neighborhood had been her way of creating the order she'd never had as a child. But she also wrote about her shame, about the nightmares that plagued her sleep, about the therapy sessions where she was finally learning to understand her actions. Lila wrote about school, about her friends, about the garden she and Amara had planted in their backyard. She sent drawings and report cards, sharing her life with the woman who had taken her father away. Some people thought the correspondence was unhealthy. She's too young to understand, they said. She's being manipulated. But Amara saw the peace it brought Lila. Her nightmares stopped. Her anxiety decreased. She was learning that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing, it was about choosing love over hate. By the time Lila turned 12, she was receiving letters from around the world. The story of her correspondence with Karen had leaked to the media, and people were fascinated by the girl who had chosen forgiveness over revenge. She started a blog called Letters from Lila, where she shared her thoughts on kindness, forgiveness, and healing. Her posts were simple but profound, written in the clear, honest voice of a child who had experienced the worst of humanity but refused to let it poison her heart. People ask me why I write to the woman who killed my daddy, she wrote in one post. They say I should hate her. But hate is heavy and I don't want to carry it around. Love is lighter. Love makes me feel like my daddy is still with me. The blog went viral. Schools invited her to speak. Churches asked her to share her story. She appeared on talk shows, her message simple but powerful. Love wins over hate, always. The movement grew. People started Lila's letters, writing to prisoners, to enemies, to anyone who had hurt them. They shared their stories of forgiveness, of healing, of choosing love over revenge. On Lila's 16th birthday, she made a decision that shocked everyone. She wanted to visit Karen in prison. Are you sure? Amara asked. You don't owe her anything. I don't owe her, Lila agreed. But I want to see her. I want to tell her in person that I forgive her. The prison visit was arranged with tight security. Lila sat across from Karen in a sterile visiting room, separated by bulletproof glass. Karen looked older, grayer, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been in years. You look just like your father, Karen said, her voice barely a whisper. People tell me that, Lila replied. I wish I could have known him longer. I robbed you of that. I robbed the world of a good man. Yes, you did. But you also gave me a choice. I could carry hate in my heart or I could choose love. I chose love. Karen wept then, her careful composure finally cracking completely. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, Lila said gently. It's about choosing to heal instead of staying wounded. They talked for an hour about Marcus, about the neighborhood, about the letters they'd exchanged. When the visit ended, Karen pressed her hand against the glass. Thank you, she whispered, for teaching me what love really means. Lila graduated high school as valedictorian, her speech focusing on the power of forgiveness to transform communities. She'd been accepted to multiple universities, with scholarship money pouring in from around the world. But first she had a promise to keep. She returned to Willow Creek for the 10th anniversary of her father's death. The neighborhood had changed dramatically. The HOA had been dissolved, replaced by a community council that focused on cooperation rather than control. The memorial bench had been joined by a community garden, where neighbors grew vegetables together. Hundreds of people gathered for the memorial service. Neighbors who had known Marcus, strangers who had been touched by his story, and people from around the world who had come to honor his memory. Lila stood at the podium looking out at the crowd. In the front row sat Amara, wiping away tears. Behind her were the neighbors who had become family, the friends who had supported them through the darkest days. My father was an ordinary man who did extraordinary things, Lila began. He loved unconditionally. He worked hard. He showed kindness to everyone he met. And when faced with hatred, he chose not to respond with hatred. She paused, looking toward the memorial bench where fresh flowers had been placed. 10 years ago, a woman's anger took my father away from me. But it couldn't take away his love. That love lived on in every person who chose kindness over cruelty, forgiveness over revenge, healing over hatred. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Today, I want to announce the Marcus Reed Foundation, dedicated to supporting single parents and promoting restorative justice. We'll provide childcare, job training, and legal assistance to families in need. We'll also work with prisons to create programs that teach empathy and healing. The applause was thunderous. But Lila wasn't finished. I also want to announce that Karen Mitchell will be released from prison next year. She served her sentence, completed extensive therapy, and shown genuine remorse for her actions. Some of you won't like this news. Some of you will say she doesn't deserve a second chance. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others frowning. But my father believed in second chances. He believed that every person had the capacity for good. So when Karen is released, she'll be working with the Marcus Reed Foundation, helping other people learn from her mistakes. The murmuring grew louder. This was controversial, even for Lila's supporters. I know some of you think I'm naive, Lila continued, that I'm too young to understand the weight of what happened. But I've lived with this tragedy for 10 years. I've studied it, learned from it, and chosen my response carefully. She looked directly at the camera, knowing her words would be broadcast around the world. Revenge feels good for a moment, but it doesn't heal anything. It doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't prevent future tragedies. Only love can do that. Only forgiveness can break the cycle of hatred. Karen's release from prison was covered by every major news outlet. Protesters gathered outside the prison gates, some calling for her continued imprisonment, others supporting Lila's message of forgiveness. Karen emerged looking years older but somehow lighter. She'd served her full sentence, earned her GED, and completed a master's degree in social work through a prison program. She'd spent the last 5 years working with other inmates, teaching anger management and conflict resolution. Lila was there to meet her, along with Amara and several supporters. The media filmed their embrace, this unlikely pair united by tragedy and transformed by forgiveness. "Are you ready for this?" Lila asked as they walked toward the waiting car. "No," Karen admitted. "But I'm ready to try. I owe it to your father. I owe it to you." Karen's work with the Marcus Reed Foundation was groundbreaking. She spoke at schools about the dangers of unchecked anger, visited prisons to share her story, and worked with homeowners associations to create more inclusive communities. Not everyone accepted her. Some people could never forgive her for what she'd done. But slowly, gradually, she began to rebuild her life with purpose and meaning. 5 years later, Lila stood at the altar in a simple white dress, her hand in that of David, a social worker she'd met at the foundation. The wedding was held in the same park where her father had died, now transformed into a symbol of hope and healing. Karen sat in the back row, tears streaming down her face. She'd helped plan the wedding, working with Amara to ensure every detail was perfect. It was the least she could do for the young woman who had saved her soul. As Lila and David exchanged vows, she spoke about her father's influence on her life. "Marcus Reed taught me that love is not a feeling but a choice," she said. "Every day we choose whether to respond to the world with love or with fear. I choose love. I choose to honor my father's memory by building a life filled with compassion, understanding, and forgiveness." The reception was held in the community center, with people from all walks of life celebrating together. Former inmates sat next to college professors. Neighbors who had once been enemies now worked together to serve food and set up decorations. During the father-daughter dance, Lila closed her eyes and imagined Marcus was there with her, proud of the woman she'd become. The song was "In My Daughter's Eyes," the same lullaby he used to sing to her as a baby. 2 years later, Lila gave birth to a son. She named him Marcus, after the father she'd barely known but whose love had shaped her entire life. As she held her newborn son, Lila thought about the cycle of love and hate, of violence and forgiveness. She thought about the choice every parent faces, what kind of world to create for their children. "You'll never meet your grandfather," she whispered to baby Marcus. "But you'll know his love. It's in every breath you take, every smile you share, every act of kindness you show." Karen visited the hospital, bringing flowers and a handwritten card. She'd become like a grandmother to Lila, their relationship complex but genuine. She was the only living person who had known Marcus as an adult, and she shared stories of his kindness even in their brief, tragic encounters. "He would have been so proud," Karen said, holding the baby with gentle hands. "He would have loved this little one so much." He does love him, Lila replied. Love doesn't die. It just changes form. On the 15th anniversary of Marcus's death, a documentary about the story aired on national television. A Father's Love, the Marcus Reed story featured interviews with Lila, Karen, Amara, and the neighbors who had witnessed the tragedy. The film showed how a single act of violence had rippled through a community, destroying some lives but ultimately transforming others. It explored themes of forgiveness, redemption, and the power of love to overcome hatred. The documentary won several awards and sparked conversations about restorative justice, community healing, and the importance of addressing mental health issues before they lead to violence. But for Lila, the most important moment came at the end of the film. She stood by her father's memorial bench, now surrounded by a thriving garden where children played and families gathered. People ask me if I ever feel angry, she said to the camera. Of course I do. I'm human. I feel anger, sadness, frustration. But I don't let those feelings control me. I choose to transform them into something positive. She picked up her son, who was now toddling around the garden, chasing butterflies and laughing with pure joy. My father's love didn't die when he did. It grew. It spread. It transformed a community and touched millions of lives around the world. That's the power of love. It multiplies instead of divides. As the documentary ended, viewers around the world were moved to action. The Marcus Reed Foundation received millions in donations. Schools started implementing forgiveness curricula. Prison systems began adopting restorative justice programs. But the most profound change happened in individual hearts. People who had been carrying grudges for years chose to forgive. Families torn apart by conflict began to heal. Communities that had been divided by hatred started to come together. Lila, now in her 30s, continued to lead the foundation while raising her children. She had 3 now: Marcus, Hope, and Grace, each one a testament to the continuing power of love over hate. Karen, in her 70s, had become a respected advocate for criminal justice reform. She'd written a book about her journey from hatred to healing, donating all the proceeds to the foundation. She spoke at conferences around the world, sharing her story as a cautionary tale and a message of hope. Amara had retired from teaching to work full-time with the foundation. She'd never married, choosing instead to dedicate her life to honoring her brother's memory and raising his daughter. The 3 women, the sister, the daughter, and the killer, had formed an unlikely family, bound together by tragedy but united by their choice to transform pain into purpose. 20 years after Marcus Reed's death, the memorial bench in Willow Creek had become a pilgrimage site. People came from around the world to see where a simple act of love had sparked a global movement. The bench was surrounded by a peace garden, where flowers bloomed year-round and children played without fear. The inscription had been updated to include the foundation's motto, "Love multiplies, hate divides." Lila brought her children there every year on the anniversary of their grandfather's death. They would lay flowers, share stories, and remember the man whose love had shaped their world. "Tell us about Grandpa Marcus," 5-year-old Grace asked, settling onto the bench beside her mother. "He was brave," Lila said, pulling all 3 children close. "He chose love even when faced with hatred. He protected what mattered most, his family, his community, his values." "Will we meet him in heaven?" asked Hope. "I don't know about heaven," Lila replied honestly. "But I know he's with us right now, in every act of kindness we show, every moment of forgiveness we choose, every time we pick love over fear." Young Marcus, now 18 and preparing for college, placed a new flower on the bench. "I want to be like him," he said quietly. "I want to make a difference." "You will," Lila assured him. "We all will. That's what love does, it creates more love." As the sun set over Willow Creek, the Reed family sat together on the bench, surrounded by the evidence of one man's enduring love. The neighborhood had been transformed, the community healed, and the world changed. All because one father chose to love his daughter completely, and that love had proven stronger than death itself. Marcus Reed had won after all. Not through revenge or violence, but through the quiet power of a love that refused to die. His legacy lived on in every person who chose forgiveness over hatred, hope over despair, and love over fear. And in the laughter of children playing in the garden where he had died, his spirit lived on, eternal and unbroken.